Hey, everybody, this is Tom Salemi of Device Talks. Welcome back to the Device Talks Weekly podcast. We missed you last week, but we are back. Chris Newmarker and I have a kind of a new way to approach the Newmarker's Newsmakers. We'll get into that. Later on, I'll speak with Mike Favet. He's the CEO of NeuroPace. NeuroPace, of course, one of the pioneers in neurostimulation. We'll talk with Mike Favet about how NeuroPace is working to present neuromodulation as a potential treatment for drug-resistant epilepsy and sort of the challenges that go with bringing a new treatment modality into an area where drugs are prevalent or dominant. So great conversation with Mike on that. We'll have Mike at DeviceTalks West, our conference, which is coming up in October. Mike will be in a panel that will feature leaders in neuromodulation, talking about how they are building their markets for their cutting edge devices. So make sure you don't miss that. Go to DeviceTalks.com to register for Device Talks West. If you register now, our early bird rate is in effect. You'll save $300 off the $695 rate. So that's $395 for 2 great days of networking, insights, and connection. So make sure you, again, join us at Device Talks West. It's happening October 18th and 19th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. It's going to be a great event. Go to DeviceTalks.com for more information. While you're there, check out our other podcasts, of course, and also check out our upcoming Device Talks Tuesdays. We've got a Device Talks Tuesdays coming up this Tuesday at 4 p.m., brought on by our friends at TE Connectivity. We'll be exploring some of the critical technology that's really driving the electrophysiology movement. And it's called How Connectors Specifically Designed for High Channel Count Catheters Can Ease Customization Challenges and Improve Manufacturing Efficiency. TE Connectivity always does a great job on their Device Talks Tuesdays. They're always amongst our more popular. So make sure you register for that. You can register for that, listen to our podcast, and of course, register for Device Talks West, all at DeviceTalks.com. So we'll get this podcast started. I've got some speaker announcements at the end of the podcast, keynotes that we'll be having at Device Talks West. It's going to be a great program. So let us get this episode started. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well.
Awesome. I have a belated birthday wish for you. You had a birthday recently, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Happy
Tom.
birthday. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Father's Day. So back to back. So you were just like, you get
Birthday.
them over and done with all at once.
Same weekend. So, but yeah, good times. Went and saw a comedy show with my wife in downtown St. Paul. Saw Nate Bargatze. He's a funny
hysterical.
guy. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah. I went to
Good stuff.
see the new Spider-Verse movie with my boys on Monday,
Oh,
Juneteenth, which was great.
it's good.
Very good. Very good. Highly
Fantastic.
recommend it. 6 thumbs up. 6 thumbs up from the Salemi.
Fantastic.
So, yes. So any good gifts from Father's Day and or birthday? Anything you want to share?
I got a new power drill. Like
Woo.
the old power drill broke. I mean, that's a useful thing. You need a power drill and screwdriver. Stuff breaks
All the time.
So, yeah. So it's fantastic. Good.
That's great.
Fantastic gift. It was really cool. It's really nice.
I got my Ember mug. You can see it here on the screen.
Oh, I love it.
They keeps my coffee hot at 144 degrees.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, I love gifts that I would never dream of buying myself. Like, sure, I'd like to have one, but
That's the worst thing in the morning when when I get really busy with a project and then I reach for my coffee and it's cold. That's just
what's that?
So sad.
And you can't microwave it. If anyone is microwaving coffee out there, can't do it.
Oh, when I confess, I do microwave my coffee sometimes when it's cold and it's like lava hot and then for the next hour.
You talk to me about grinding my own beans. How dare you microwave your coffee?
What do I do if it's cold? Do I heat it on the stove? Do I turn it? I mean, I guess this is a good time here to I could turn it into iced coffee. I could
do that. That's always a good move.
throw some ice in a glass,
I may saucepan it, or I'll make a new cup of coffee, depending on on how cold it is. All right. Well, we've covered all the important topics.
We got it. Yeah. Let's see everybody. Have a great weekend.
Exactly. So we're doing a bit of innovation here at DeviceTalks Weekly. You and I talked recently, and you came up with some great ideas this week as to how we might approach the Newsmaker element differently, since we have our fabulous Fast Five podcast that's delivering the top 5 stories every day.
Yeah. Danielle and Sean are rocking it with like the top headlines every day. And if you're not listening to that podcast, you're missing out. So you're missing out if you're not listening to, well, you're listening to us. Thank you so much. But you should listen. It's a quick 10-minute dose of news every day. So it's fantastic, but then at the same time, then, I think there's some weeks where there's just going to be so much news. We go through all the Newmarkers, Newsmakers. But I think this week we're going to try doing a Newmarkers Newsmaker.
Why don't you tell the folks at home what that is, Chris? How are we approaching this, with the caveat that, we may tinker with this because we're innovators, like all of you out there. We're innovators.
Well, I mean, kind of this week, there's just like this, really large trend that we saw. I mean, so like in the middle of the week, we had Philips and Biotronik. They were, announcing a partnership in the cardiovascular devices space. Philips has this whole, Symphony suite, and Biotronik is going to be, developing, as products and services for treating cardiovascular and endovascular diseases. So they're packaging these together. And I mean, since the pandemic, and we had like kind of all these economic things going on that are presenting, challenges, we were just seeing a lot more of these, types of partnerships.
Yeah.
Between companies.
And I think the point of what we'll try to do with the Newsmakers, or the Newsmaker going forward, the Newmarker Newsmaker, is instead of looking just over the past week for the top news, look over the past month or so and try to find the trends, the big picture, zoom out a bit, try to connect some dots. So hopefully we'll be able to develop some discussions that'll sort of, again, draw points attention to a bigger trend, a bigger development in medical devices. So, and we'll also look at cool tech. I think if we've got a bunch of cool tech coming out, we should talk about cool tech. I think if we've got a lot of big people moves, we can talk about big people.
Exactly.
So we'll try to take a more thematic base with our Newsmaker, the Newsmaker being the topic. We may talk about multiple companies. Why not? Because there's so much going on.
Yeah. Or some week we might have newsmakers because there's just so much news going on. So we'll yeah.
So we talked. You introduced and folks, we're kind of doing this on the fly right now. We haven't really scripted this out. Chris and I don't script things out. You may have noticed.
We're like a jazz band.
We are. We will scat. We will do. But so we introduced the Philips and Biotronik news item, which Sean Hooley wrote earlier this week. We can explore this one a bit more deeply, Chris, or do you want to kind of throw out the other items first, and then we can talk about things that, lessons that we're kind of drawing from? I agree with you with Philips Biotronik. I think it's just another move by a large industry player. It's already been sort of targeting the ASC market to really strengthen their offerings there and to try to provide their products to alternate care sites. And we're going to see much more of that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of what I'd say is, I mean, occasionally we would have stories on mass device about larger companies doing some kind of partnership, but definitely in the past year or two, we're just seeing a lot more of it. And my sense is that overall, this is a good thing that we're seeing a lot more cooperation in the industry. I mean, perhaps some of these partnerships in the past would have been M&A deals, but with interest rates higher, with just more expensive to run a business, they're not doing this. But I think this greater cooperation, it's got to be. I would suspect this just has to be a good thing that we're seeing a lot more of this. And I was thinking it'd be interesting. I mean, because the other thing that really stuck out, the other story that really stuck out to me this week in the space was GE Healthcare announcing a partnership with Depuy Synthes, in the spine tech space, and GE Healthcare is especially interesting because they have just been on a tear over the past year. I mean they're now like about half a year as an independent company, spun out of GE, but since really in the year leading up to that spin out, and since then they've been just doing a whole host of partnerships that appear to there appears to be this very concerted strategy to partner with other companies and put them in a stronger position to grow going forward as this independent medtech company.
So this will bring GE Healthcare's OEC 3D imaging system in line with Depuy's extensive spine portfolio. So
Exactly.
yeah,
In this OEC 3D surgical, imaging system, and they've got this C-arm that provides mobile CBCT imaging, and so they're talking about like it enabling like interoperative 3D volumes, 2D high definition imaging, a large anatomical field of view, and they Phil Ratcliffe, a CEO of GE Healthcare's imaging guided therapies business, like described this as kind of like a game changer for clinicians, and now they can package all these Depuy Synthes spine procedure products
mhm.
around it.
And as you mentioned in the article that came out on the 21st, and you wrote it, GE has announced collaborations with Boston Scientific, with Elekta, with Medtronic,
Yeah,
with Sinopharm or Sinopharm. I'm not sure if I'm saying that
I
correctly.
think it's Sinopharm.
Yeah, but I'm with you. And when I read these articles, I feel like I'm going to be thinking back to this conversation with Mike Mahoney at DeviceTalks Boston, Mike Mahoney of Boston Scientific, that we had at DeviceTalks Boston, where we were talking about robotics programs, and Mike Mahoney's point was like, look, we do this really well. We're going to continue to do devices well. Let Intuitive do robotics really well, and let's not spend money on things that aren't our core business. And it's interesting to see if we'll see more of these types of partnerships as sort of an expression of that idea that medical device companies, everyone doesn't need to have their own surgical robotics program. Everyone doesn't need to have their own 3D imaging program. Partnerships are available. There's an opportunity for greater collaboration and ecosystems. Hopefully that drives value. Hopefully that drives adoption. The healthcare sector needs all of this. We need more products to ambulatory surgery centers. That's where the future of care likely will be as hospitals get phased out more and more. So it feels as if there's a reaction. The industry is sort of slowly reacting to that reality and finding ways to collaborate, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I could tell with this GE Healthcare Depuy Synthes partnership. There was actually some of the chatter on LinkedIn was about how there were a lot of ambulatory surgery center opportunities with this partnership. Like, so that GE and Depuy Synthes could go in together to kind of like line up more of these ASCs as partners. So it's as clients. So there's such a push with that, and it's interesting in the past. You're talking about robotic surgery. You had like I think there was this real. I think with the big companies in medtech, there was this real the sense of urgency that they needed to get into surgical robotics because they had all these surgical devices, and they didn't want to be selling them around someone else's robot. So it's like, oh well, we need a robot that we can sell all this stuff around. But as we've seen, it's been challenging. Medtronic has been selling Hugos in Europe. They're looking to get in the US, but it's undoubtedly, especially with supply chain, been challenging for Medtronic. And I've even read an analyst report where they were, asking like, is the Hugo differentiated enough from Intuitive's Da Vinci, to truly compete in the US? Medtronic's still sticking with Hugo, but it's been a challenging road with it. And Johnson & Johnson, they've got their Atava robot, but we're still like wait and see. Like we're still waiting to hear from Johnson & Johnson what they're gonna do with that.
And I think the deal that sort of best represents what a Boston Scientific could do would have been the deal between Abbott and Stereotaxis that they announced last month, that Sean Hooley wrote about, where they're going to be basically using Stereotaxis's robotic system, their robotic system, to pair it with Abbott's electrophysiology offerings. And it was interesting because we launched our first Abbott Talks about a week and a half ago now. And I talked with Dr. Philip Adamson, who's the divisional vice president and chief medical officer for the heart failure division, and Christopher Piakovsky, who is the divisional vice president and chief medical officer of electrophysiology. And in that conversation, I asked about whether or not electrophysiology procedures could be done over a longer distance if robotics was brought in. And this was prior to the announcement. I did the interview prior to the announcement with Stereotaxis. So I don't know if he was sort of holding back. He kind of paused and said, certainly, there'll need to be someone on site, obviously, to insert the catheter, but there's no reason why a more experienced person from far away can guide the procedure and hopefully deliver superior care. And we might see something similar. This is off topic a little bit. This isn't a partnership, but I talked with Ariel Sutton at Imperative Care, which is neurovascular, and they're developing a robotic system to help them get to further reaches of the brain. So it's just interesting to see robotics sort of, it very much feels like it's taking that next step from this big capital crazy product that companies are committing a lot of funds to, so they can have a channel upon which to sell all of their devices to something more selective and more targeted and maybe more digestible by hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers.
I would say that I thought it was, this is going off on a tangent, but I mean, Intuitive in their recent earnings call said they were having a lot of success. Like they're really getting into the data. They said, and like making the case to health providers of all these better outcomes with these large robots. So, maybe that's that can help them. They're still finding ways to do it with those large capital expensive robots for hospitals. But
absolutely, I mean, if you listen to Gary Guthard's interview we did with him at DeviceTalks West last year, he talked a lot about data. If you talk to Robert Cohen of Stryker, if you listen to the podcast we did with him. And he, of course, was at DeviceTalks Boston as well. I mean, we can get to the point where the data can inform you as to what type of implant to use in a particular person by looking at their age, their health status. Do they have diabetes? What's their weight? What's their BMI? I mean, all these things that can just be factored in to ensure that they get the right implant, the optimal implant is what I'm working for, to give them the best possible outcome.
And then the people with the more skeptical mindset will be like, well, but the healthcare data is a mess. So, like, can they?
Yeah. I mean, that data management is always going to be key. So going back to our original theme about partnerships, it certainly seems that there's a lot more of a collaborative spirit in medical devices, and it's going to be interesting to track that. I
definitely think like GE Healthcare has definitely been one of the real leaders in that trend. I mean, it's just pretty wild going over the, this whole list that, like they're collaborating with Boston Scientific on cardiac care in Southeast Asia. They're, Siemens Healthineers, merged with Varian, to boost itself in the radiation oncology space. GE Healthcare instead decided to collaborate with Elekta.
Yep.
I mean, this whole ambulatory surgery center space, they're partnering with Medtronic to, with their products and services to get into that, space. Then, to make more inroads in this Chinese medical device market, they announced a long-term joint venture with Sinopharm, which is, one of the largest, life sciences companies in the world. It's like, I mean, it's kind of when I read the description of what Sinopharm is in China, it's like if CVS was merged with Pfizer and maybe Boston Scientific or some. It's just just such a huge company in the Chinese market. So I mean that definitely got my attention when they said they were partnering with them there. So.
And just revisiting the surgical robotics side again one more time, because we had Martin Bueller at our DeviceTalks Boston /Healthcare Robotics Engineering Forum. They're looking at some big news this year. He kind of hinted at it. And we had you reported on Medtronic hiring Ken Washington as their new technology officer, and he has robotic experience at Amazon, more of a consumer focus. So there also might be clever ways of of steering these bigger
Oh, I mean,
projects.
Washington had experience in both automotive and aerospace,
Yep.
and
Yep.
you need to make sure things don't break in those spaces. I definitely don't want to be on a plane that has a park brake. So
So that's what we're seeing. I think that's an interesting trend. And if folks have thoughts on this, make sure you share it on the LinkedIn post where you've perhaps found
yeah,
this this podcast.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, are you seeing this trend as well? That there's a lot more openness to collaboration and partnerships right now in the industry, and is this is overall, does this feel like it's a good thing?
Yep. And I think we'll get into this later on, but it kind of goes hand in hand with the divestitures that we're seeing, where companies are just shelving or selling off non-core businesses so they can focus on what they're good at and maybe partner for the rest.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely feels like we're in this really like serious reassessment period right now. I mean, we got through the pandemic, and just having these, right now with it being costing more to run a business, med tech companies and companies in general are kind of like doing a serious reassessment. Like what are we doing here? What's our core thing we should be focusing on? And what should we stop doing? What should we spin out, or partner with somebody, instead of like developing ourselves, so it's it's going to be, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how things shake out by the end of this year.
absolutely. No, it feels like there's some resetting going on. So good
Yeah.
stuff. We'll get into the interview now. I just we didn't really talk about this, but one story that will find interesting to follow is Brooke Story being named president of surgery
Yes.
business at BD, particularly since they sold off some of their surgical instrumentation, most of it, I think, to Steris this week as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see what BD's plans are for the surgery business unit. Hope to have Brooke Story on the podcast in hopefully a couple of weeks. We'll see what her availability is. She might need more than that, but
And
exciting to see where BD might be
yeah,
headed.
I mean, yeah, and yeah, she's definitely one of the executives to watch in our industry. So that was really cool news. And I just have to add. Okay, so we're talking on Friday, the Mass Device Plus 5 the day before. We were leading with the news of Brooke Story becoming president of the surgery business at BD, and then we also had news in there of Integra Life Sciences naming Leigh Daniels Knight as their CFO. And I just got to say, it was actually really cool to see a plus 5 with two major personnel announcements, and it was both African American women. It's very
That's
cool.
great. Yep. Yep. Very good to point that out. All right. Well, that's our Newmarker's Newsmaker.
Newmarker's Newsmaker.
Parentheses S, because there's multiple. We'll figure out the branding, but
we'll get there.
All right. Well, great job as always, Chris Newmarker.
Fantastic.
Well, Mike Favet, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back, sort of. You were on a podcast I had worked on previously when you first joined NeuroPace in 2019. So this is a nice opportunity to kind of reconnect and see how things are going. As I did then, I'd like to do again, just sort of understand your path into medical devices, because I'm assuming some people didn't hear that previous podcast and they might want to know, how did you find your way into the industry?
I started in medical device way at the beginning of my career. I started coming out of engineering school. I got a degree in mechanical engineering over 30 years ago and took my first job in the medical device industry. I worked for cardiac pacemakers, which was a division of Eli Lilly, became Guidant, the cardiac rhythm management of Guidant at that time.
Okay.
And the rest of my career has really followed from that. I really fell in love with the medical device space. I've had an opportunity to work in a number of jobs, a number of different types of companies, a number of different areas related to medical technology over those years, but it's been my entire career.
What was it that drew you to medical devices? Was it the coolness of the tech, or was it the mission of helping people? I'm guessing it's a blend of both, but I should have you answer the question, not me.
It is a blend of both. It's the combination of the benefit, the impact that medical technology has on people's lives, the positive impacts that the things that we do have on society and have on individuals that have medical conditions. And then the technology that goes along with that. I often think about the challenges of working in medical devices where you have really challenging, interesting technology that has to work with people, the physiologic connection of the technology back to people, and then the complexities of the system that operates in, working with physicians that do recommendations and administer the therapies, the healthcare system, the regulatory process, the complexity of all of that together has always been appealing to me, to find a way to work through that and achieve those positive benefits for patients and society.
So just looking at your career, you were with Guidant at the time of the Boston Scientific acquisition. Talk about that experience. It was certainly one that from the outside looked like it had some difficulties, some challenges integrating one big entity into another. Can you give us an insider's view? I knew you were just there for a couple of years. You were vice president of R&D there, but what was that experience like?
It was my first experience going through an acquisition. I had been with Guidant from the start. I was with the medical device division of Eli Lilly that became Guidant, stayed there for the 10 years that Guidant existed, and then was acquired by Boston Scientific as part of that process. I'd never been through that, an acquisition within any business before. And so it was a firsthand experience for me about what it's like to merge two companies together, different cultures that go along with that. For my personal experience, I was with Boston Scientific only for a couple of years because I got my second M&A opportunity very quickly after that, as Boston Scientific spun out the cardiac surgery business that I was with. So I was able to leverage some of that experience that I had on Guidant within Boston Scientific to find a buyer for the cardiac surgery business and then ultimately move it to a new owner as well. As you know, within the medical tech space, medical device space, mergers and acquisitions happen regularly. And that's been very helpful for me to understand through my own experiences what it's like to do that. That was on a very large scale. There's other times where it's on obviously a much smaller scale as well.
So at what point did you know you wanted to go from engineering to sort of the executive role? Because you were COO at a couple of companies, Sonitis Medical and Advanced Cardiac Therapeutics. And then you did a stint on the dark side when you went to the private equity group that we can talk about for a moment. But did you always know you wanted to be involved in operations?
I knew relatively early in my career that I wanted to move into broader management, ultimately management, but broader aspects of medical device. As I mentioned earlier, started my career coming out of engineering school, doing engineering work, development work, and manufacturing engineering work. I fairly quickly went on to get my MBA, knowing that I had interests beyond engineering. I wanted to combine together that understanding of the technology and the development aspects with the how to merge in those other parts of the business as well. I didn't know where my career was going to take me back then, but I knew relatively early that I wanted to have opportunities that were cross-functional, starting in engineering, but had cross-functional opportunities beyond that. As I went through my career, I became more and more interested in moving into management roles and into broader operational roles. I had an opportunity to work in a number of different departments within organizations, and ultimately bringing those together in an overall management position has been really a very rewarding part of my career, and has worked out really well to be able to pull those together to get to where I'm at now.
Did you ever spend any time in the sales and marketing side? That's a common path, I think, for folks who go into the executive branch from engineering. They kind of use that as a bridge, but you didn't. I don't see that on your resume.
I did through my career a couple of different times. When I was at Guidant, I had a period of time where I was part of the field sales organization. I went out into the field. I was working in Michigan, supporting the cardiac rhythm management business in the sales function. That was my first opportunity really to understand how the technology that we've developed applied to patients, how the doctors interacted with it. And then I was able to bring that back into in-house positions after that. And then later in my career, I had general management responsibilities that included the commercial parts of the organization, sales and marketing within Guidant, Boston Scientific, as well as more recently, before I took the CEO job at NeuroPace, I spent about a year, 9 months as the chief commercial officer for that business, running sales and marketing, leading up to the transition. So yes, I had that experience along with a number of other functional experiences that really helped pull those pieces together.
We're talking a lot about engineers sort of finding ways to increase their number of opportunities, paths that they might take. If an engineer is listening to this and they're thinking about how they might migrate to a different part of the medtech industry, what advice would you give them? Is the MBA, is that really the critical piece you need, or should they go looking for opportunities at a sales and marketing part of the business? What's a good step for an engineer to take?
The MBA is helpful. It gives you the theoretical understanding of what the commercial part of the business or the operations part of the business is like. There's nothing that replaces real world experience. So often you're getting an MBA to allow yourself the opportunity to get work experience in other parts of the organization. That's what I did when I got my MBA. It was something that enabled me to move on to other roles in the future. Having those opportunities, it's not a fit for everybody, but for people that have that interest, there's a tremendous amount of value of taking a expertise within one part of an organization and then being able to leverage that into others. And I found with my experience in moving from a engineering role to a field role that I was able to bring that in-depth understanding of the product and the way that the product worked and the way that the in-house part of the organization worked, to be able to use that experience to be more effective in a field role. And then similarly, when I came back from the field role in-house, the knowledge of the way the medical device technologies work in the field, the way you sell them, the way you support them, that's been invaluable bringing that back in. So for me personally, a lot of great experience that came out of that. And for people that have that interest, an MBA is a helpful step to get to it. Not necessary for everybody, but it's a helpful understanding base to be able to build off of.
Interesting. And you get the network, I'm sure that is always a help. So let's move into where you are current day. Well, you did move over to KCK where you were a managing director. And I think that's when I first met you on the private equity side. That was 2016. Was that a move? I'm going to do this for a couple of years, so it gives me a good perch upon which to see my next operations opportunity, or did you think private equity was the way you wanted to go?
I didn't know going into it. It was a significant shift for me. I had spent all of my career up till that point on the operating company side of medical technology. A great opportunity for me to move over into the venture investing, venture capital side of the med tech space. And I went into it knowing that I would be learning a lot. I'm really looking forward to that new opportunity and unsure whether that was going to be the rest of my career or if it was going to be something that I did for a number of years and then came back to the operating company. It turned out that it was something I did for about 3 years before coming back to the medtech operating company role. Tremendous experience that I had there, lots of understanding of the way that side of the industry works, thinks, and being able to apply that back into an operating company role has been invaluable. But as I went into it, I didn't know whether that was what I would do for the rest of my career, or if it would be something I did for a while.
Great. Well, I want to get into NeuroPace, but before we do, I'm just curious, do you still see yourself as an engineer doing all these non-engineering jobs, or have you given up that part of your DNA and you're no longer identify that way?
It has been so many years since I did actual engineering work that it would be hard for me to claim that's something that I still do. That said, my mind still works that way. I'm very much the engineering mind, the thinking process that goes along with that.
Yeah.
So I would never give that up kind of as my fundamental base that I built off of. But I am so many years away from having the skills to be able to do that.
You're not going to profess it publicly, but internally you get it. Yeah, you get it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the decision to join NeuroPace. You did that in 2019. NeuroPace was one of those companies that I started covering the industry in 98, 97. And I remember writing about NeuroPace back then, getting a series, whatever, maybe A or B. It was one of those companies that had been around forever. Really, I think was the flag bearer for the neurostimulation, neuromodulation space for so long. What was it about the company in 2019 that you saw that said, this is a company I want to take to the next level?
I had an opportunity with NeuroPace, being on the board of directors for a few years prior to becoming the CEO, to really understand the technology, the market, and the people within the organization. As I mentioned, I also was the chief commercial officer for about 9 months prior to taking the CEO role. So I really had a front row seat into the company and the technology And when the opportunity came up to apply for, to put my name into consideration for the CEO role, that was a really well-informed decision for me, given the experience that I had with the company up until that point. What I loved about the company at that time, still love about the company, is the drive to move a new kind of therapy into the market. The whole space of neuromodulation to treat medical conditions is still in the early days. There's been good adoption of it in a number of therapy areas, but there's still a large gap of people who are not well treated by medications, by pharmaceutical treatments, that neuromodulation has an opportunity to be able to come in and play a big role. NeuroPace is at the forefront of that. We have a very, very unique technology that has applicability in epilepsy, where we're currently treating patients with epilepsy, opportunity to be able to expand from that. I'm a big believer overall that the neuromodulation technologies is going to be a big growth driver for medical devices in the future, and an opportunity to be in a role in a leading company within that space was really appealing.
And where was NeuroPace in development of its system, the RNS system, in terms of regulatory approval, place in the marketplace? Where was it in 2019?
In 2019, the product was commercial in the United States. We had our first generation of the product that was being sold. We were getting adoption from a number of centers, early adopting centers and early adopting physicians within those centers. And the company was at a spot where we needed to accelerate the growth adoption, move from that early adopter phase to broader acceptance, utilization of the technology. Some of that included the need to make improvements to the device and the technology. Some of it was clinical work that we needed to do to get the word out about the benefits of the unique approach that we're taking to providing therapy. And then a lot of it was about building up the commercial capability of the organization, really moving that to the forefront, and then being able to build off of that, then to be able to get this to be a mainstream frontline therapy for drug-resistant epilepsy patients.
Did you see this as an opportunity to lead a company that had all the pieces in place and had the right strategy in place, or did you see this as an opportunity to lead a company that had very good parts and needed some restructuring and different approaches to things? What was your view on the company back then?
It had my view of the company at that time was it had many of the pieces, but needed some new pieces to be added, additional pieces to be added, and some adjustments to really get the company to be able to operate at the level that it was capable of. I think that's true generally for people coming into new roles. That it was not, there were a lot of fundamental building blocks that were there. The product approval was in place, reimbursement was established, the technology had been developed, but there were some gaps and capabilities that were needed and adjustments to be able to get the company to be as successful as it's capable of being.
And you had succeeded Frank Fisher, who was really the only CEO for the company, at least the only one I'm aware of. Maybe there was one in the mid-90s that I missed.
No, he was the founding CEO, and yes, I came in following Frank into this role.
Yeah. So talk a bit about taking over, if you would. Just what's it like leading a company who's been under one CEO the entire time? Do you feel a need to change culture? Do you feel a need to fit the culture that's there? I think every situation is different, but I wonder how you approached it with NeuroPace. Again, and you were already working there, so you kind of had a sense of what it was like.
I did have a sense coming into it. The company had a culture that was a really solid one to build off of. There were some fundamentals with the mission-driven orientation of the company, patient first, a really strong technology and clinical capability and foundation that we were able to build off of. What I was coming into the organization to do, at least when I started, my intent was to really build out a commercial capability, commercial excellence, transition the company to being a leader commercially, to apply this technology and the clinical data and the capabilities of the organization in a way that increased adoption, utilization, accelerated that, to be able to enable us to do more on the technology side. So many of the capabilities were there. I wanted to keep those and nurture those, but also knowing that there were some changes that we needed to make to get the company, in particular on the commercial side, to be operating at the level that it needed to.
So those changes that you felt needed to be made were bringing in the sales teams and just building out the commercial operation, or was there more on the early part of the process, the R&D process, that also needed to change? Where were those changes?
The changes primarily were in building up the commercial capability. We had a field team. The company was commercial. We were selling product. There were some changes that needed to be made to the structure, how that team was organized, the strategy and the process that we were using to sell the product, the people, in some cases, getting the people that were the right fit for the organization and the market that we're selling into. That was the majority of my focus, was about building up that commercial capability, the sales capability, the marketing capability, the processes that go with that. We were and are selling a new therapy. What we're doing is working with clinicians to get patients that otherwise were not being treated or being treated with drug therapy that was not controlling their seizures, to get them to move on to providing therapy, neuromodulation therapy, to be able to help these patients. And developing a new therapy requires a very specific commercial approach that's different than selling a better product or a different product to an existing market. Creating a market requires a different commercial focus. And that was my work, was building up a team that was capable of developing a market.
Well, this is a great opportunity to take a look at the RNS system itself. Talk a bit about what the RNS system does and how does it do it?
The NeuroPace RNS system is a unique device. It's a responsive neurostimulation system. We have a device, a neurostimulator, that is connected to leads, electrodes that are positioned into the brain. The device is programmed to detect patient-specific abnormal brain patterns that are associated with an upcoming seizure. When the device detects those abnormal brain patterns, it responds in real time with stimulation that can prevent those abnormal brain patterns from becoming a clinical event. The device also records information about those abnormal brain patterns, when those are happening, trends those to the doctor, records the brain signals associated with those abnormal events. What were the brain signals prior to an abnormal event? What were the brain signals after our therapy is provided? We have a database that the data from the device, recorded by the device, is uploaded into a database that the doctors can use to look at what's happening inside of their patient's brain. That data feedback is used to optimize the way that our device is programmed, the detection, programming, the stimulation parameters. And it's also used by the physicians to manage the way the drug therapy is used for those patients, to inform and identify what triggers the seizures. Many different uses of that data, both for our device and also for the overall medical management of those patients.
So you're not competing with medication, at least not yet. Initially, you're targeting patients who aren't responding. What's the marketplace like for this? Is there competition? I see on your website you've got a comparison between the RNS system and vagus nerve systems. Is this a space where you've got some competitors?
The primary competition for our product is non-use. The majority of patients that have drug-resistant epilepsy are not being treated with advanced therapies. Overall, in the United States, there are about 1.2 million people that have drug-refractory epilepsy. Less than 1% of those patients every year get some advanced treatment. 99% of them are not getting some advanced treatment. Even for the patients that are being seen within epilepsy centers, comprehensive epilepsy centers, being seen by a specialist, on the order of 15% of those patients get advanced treatment. 85% of those patients are not getting advanced treatment today. Primarily, our growth driver is getting more of those patients that have drug-resistant epilepsy to treatment. With that said, there are other devices and there are other interventions that are being used for patients that have drug-resistant epilepsy. There are surgical interventions where the portion of the brain that seizures originate from can be removed, surgically resected and removed, or ablated, and the brain tissue in that area destroyed to stop the onset of those seizures. And there are a couple of other neuromodulation devices that are being used for drug-resistant epilepsy as well. The neuromodulation alternatives, the other devices, both use a duty cycle approach where there's stimulation provided on a cycle, stimulation for a period of time, pause, stimulate, pause. And that blind cycle repeats again and again. Nobody else has a approach that's the one that we do, which is identifying abnormal brain patterns, stimulating into those abnormal brain patterns to get them back to normal, preventing those seizures. The approach we're taking means that patients are only being treated when they need to be treated. Most of the time, a person with epilepsy, their brain is functioning normally. On average, our device is providing about 3 minutes of stimulation per day. The other 23 hours and 57 minutes, the person that has epilepsy, their brain's functioning normally, and we let that happen. With the duty cycle devices, they're stimulating hours per day, irrespective of what's happening inside of the brain. And they're not providing that diagnostic data that's so important for the patients and for the doctors to be able to optimize their care.
So let's talk for a moment then about the bigger competitor, which is the lack of people not using this device. I can't imagine it's such a horrible disease. If you're not responding to the medication, you don't really have another option. What is keeping the other 99% or the other 85% and those people in epilepsy centers from using some kind of therapy, yours or someone else's?
The primary work we're doing commercially is to get the word out of the benefits of our product, the therapeutic benefits, the outcomes that we're able to achieve, which are very compelling outcomes over a long period of time. Helping the physicians understand, the physicians that are managing these patients understand those benefits, the physicians understand the importance of moving their patients on to be treated, and ultimately getting this kind of therapy, our therapy and neuromodulation in general, to be seen as a therapy that they're proposing and evaluating their patients for, so that it fits into their way of doing medicine, practicing medicine. That's a change in mindset. There are many physicians today that aren't thinking about those advanced treatment options. It's just looking at what's the next drug that we're going to try, the next dose, the next combination of medical therapies. And neuromodulation broadly, not just for epilepsy, is about getting physicians to think beyond the medical management for those patients that can't be well managed with medicine. But that's a different paradigm for the physicians. And our work within the commercial organization is getting the education to those physicians and also to the patients so they can push for the treatment options for those treatments as well. And we're making good progress on that. Every year we're getting more and more patients to be treated, more and more physicians starting to use RNS for their patients. It's a process, and it takes time to change the way for physicians to change the way that they're offering therapies to their patients.
But I would think that in this day and age, if I have a loved one who's suffering from this, I'm on the internet the next day or that day, and I'm finding information about your system and I'm bringing it up to the physician in the next appointment, if not sooner. Are physicians resistant to this? Because I have to imagine patients will cling to anything. Are physicians resistant, or is this also a case of, I don't know where the insurers fall in all of this? Is it an economic challenge?
I would not say that the physicians
and resistance
are
probably harsh. Yeah. No.
How
would you? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
The physicians are in a process of really adopting this therapy to have it be something that they're advocating for their patients. And some physicians are well along that path where they know the benefits of neuromodulation therapy. When they have a patient that comes into their practice, they're talking to their patients about these advanced treatment options and the importance of moving on. There are other physicians that are not as familiar with the technology or are not as comfortable talking to their patients about those treatment options. And that's the work of our group. So I wouldn't say that it's resistant specifically, but it's moving the practice of medicine so that it's much more really advocating for the patients and the need to move on to additional therapies versus being comfortable waiting and trying another therapy first, another drug first before moving on, getting out of that cycle of wait and try another drug. That's the historical momentum that we're pushing against.
How long does it take to determine whether a drug is taking effect or not? Because as you stated, the seizures they may come weeks without it, or I guess it would take a long time to know whether or not a drug is working.
It does take a long time for that to work. It's typically months. A patient will get put onto a new drug or a new dose of a new drug. They'll come back for a follow-up visit 3 months later, 6 months later, and adjustments that are happening there. The unfortunate reality for people with uncontrolled epilepsy is that they're being managed on these drugs for many, many years, often decades. The average patient that received our device implant in the clinical trial had uncontrolled epilepsy for 20 years prior to getting our device. So it is a very slow process, and there's a history there of being comfortable with it taking a long time. We're working, and many people within the medical community are working to change that, to create discomfort with waiting and emphasizing the importance of moving patients on to be treated and to have them benefit for all of those years with better outcomes.
And is there a challenge also? I'm looking at the device itself. I mean, this is a device, it looks like any other defibrillator, any other kind of device, but the leads, I imagine they go to the brain, since that's where the treatment is delivered. Is that a hurdle for some, that they just, the idea of brain surgery or inserting something in their brain is maybe they need to exhaust every avenue before they'll consider that?
For some patients, it is a decision point. It's a barrier for some patients. What I've found is that when you have physicians that are advocating and communicating the importance of the therapy and the benefit of the therapy, that patient acceptance is very high. When you have physicians that are not advocating for it, it's easy to find a reason to say no. For these patients that have uncontrolled epilepsy, you have to imagine that the world that they're living in. And often these patients have been into emergency rooms, and many times the diagnostic processes leading this device to our device or other therapies include hospital stays. Brain surgeries are often part of that process. And so for you and I that are fortunate not to have walked through that pathway, it's a very different perspective for somebody who's been living with the effects of uncontrolled seizures for all of these years. So when, again, we have physicians that are advocating and communicating the benefits and the importance of being treated, tends not to be a significant factor, but it is that first look that we have to overcome of why you need to move forward. What's the reasons to move forward?
Yeah, and I have to think that, I think about the seizures themselves and how terrifying that must be, but what also comes with that is all the things you maybe can't do because those seizures may come, drive, hold down a job, just kind of live a more typical existence. I'm sure a lot of people are enduring that, and it would be incentive to get back to normalcy. It would be incentive to have this procedure done, I imagine. I'm sure that's a selling point.
Absolutely. Our mission at NeuroPace is transforming the lives of people that live with epilepsy. And I've had the privilege of talking to so many of our patients that are benefiting from the RNS therapy that talk about the way that their lives have been transformed. Being able to move out of a caregiver's house, parent's house, and be able to live on their own, to be able to feel confident to have children where they were not confident to be able to have a family, to be able to have a job that they weren't able to have prior, to be able to travel in ways that they weren't able to. Every patient has their own story and the benefits that go along with this. What we do at NeuroPace really does transform lives of patients, and that's so central to what we're doing. And it's part of why we are so motivated to get more of these patients that have uncontrolled seizures to be treated, because we see how much of an impact it does have on patients that have been able to benefit from the therapy.
And just to be clear, is RNS used in conjunction with maybe one therapy, one drug treatment? Or is it RNS is the sole treatment for your patients who have it?
The patients that have a drug-resistant epilepsy, generally speaking, are still being managed with pharmaceutical treatment.
Okay.
They're getting some benefit from the anti-epileptic medication, but it's not enough to control their seizures. When a NeuroPace device, when the RNS device gets implanted, those patients continue to be on drug therapy. But often the RNS device is used to identify which drugs could they come off of. The side effect profile of these anti-epileptic medications is profound.
Oh, yeah.
So having opportunities to remove some drugs that are causing significant side effects, to be able to control dosage for drugs that have significant side effects. We're always working in combination, almost always working in combination with medical management, but being able to inform that management in a way that optimizes the seizure reduction while minimizing the side effect profile of the drug is what the way that the device is often used. And that's part of the transforming opportunities for these patients. If you can reduce the number of their seizures and reduce the side effect profile by being able to change the way that the medical management is being done, together those make really profound impacts on patients' lives.
Wow, those are some amazing stories to get from patients. So two more things I want to talk about the business in a moment, but I asked earlier about reimbursement. So if patients are still taking the meds, and this is for at least some of the meds until they can get off them, and they're having this done on top of that, how are insurers looking at this? I mean, they look at economically. Are they reimbursing for this procedure? Are you having a difficult time convincing insurers to pay for this?
Reimbursement for our product has been well established for a number of years. It was largely in place when I started 4 years ago in this role. The insurance providers see the benefit of this therapy. The cost of uncontrolled epilepsy is significant to the healthcare system. Being able to provide a therapy that controls seizures, reduces the number of those events, has been well accepted and well adopted by physicians. The work we're doing for reimbursement today is supporting expanding indications, as we're working within our company to have more patients indicated for the RNS device. In combination with that, we're working to expand the insurance treatment for those patients. For our currently indicated patients, reimbursement is well established, and the benefits of that are well established by the insurance providers.
Okay. Final questions. You've been generous with your time, and I appreciate it. You took the company public in 2021?
Correct.
Right? So what was that process like? I mean, it seemed like obviously a necessary outcome for a company that's been privately held for 20 plus years for some sort of liquidity to come. What was the process like? And talk a bit about life after going public. I know you went out, your stock was higher than it is today. That can be said for a lot of companies out there, but I wonder if you come up against any unique challenges that have brought that stock price down. Talk about going public first, and then we'll talk about the post-IPO stuff after. What was that experience like?
Yeah, you're right. We went public in April of 2021, a little over 2 years ago. Went through that process and completed that process. For us, that was an opportunity to bring additional capital into the company. We raised over $100 million as part of the IPO, which was very important for us to use to expand our commercial reach, to be able to support indication expansion studies that are underway to broaden the applicability of the RNS device. And it also provided a transition to a new set of investors, a different set of investors that we're working with now that are supporting the company. The process leading up to that was really fascinating process for me to take the company through that process, telling the story, sharing the benefits and the importance of what we're doing, and the expectations that we have about growing the company, growing revenue, ultimately getting to profitability, having that resonate with investors to lead to a successful IPO. And then following the IPO, it's a matter of executing against that. As I reflect back on the last 4 years, it's been a very interesting 4 years in the medical device space, going through the financing that we needed to do on private financing when I started, working through the pandemic and the impacts that had on our business in particular. And then as we're coming out of that, really putting ourselves on a foundation footing to be able to grow from that. The stock market has been a challenging one for companies like ours that are earlier stage revenue, not yet profitable. There's been a roller coaster ride that goes along with that. We've been very successful in 2023 and really getting a lot of momentum, positive momentum on the investment side, being able to increase the stock price as we've been able to demonstrate consistent performance within the business, being able to grow revenue, increase revenue, bring in some new sources of revenue. Last year, we added a product line with the Dixie Medical stereo EEG electrodes. There's a new product line that we're selling here for the last 2 quarters, bringing all of that together to put us really on a nice revenue ramp growth that has been translated back to really positive performance that we've seen in 2023 in the stock market as well.
Talk a bit about the view with the Dixie Medical. I'm looking at it right now. I somehow missed that. You have the exclusive right to market and sell Dixie Medical diagnostic electrodes for epilepsy. Are these used with the RNS device, or are these above and beyond that?
We became the exclusive United States distributor of the Dixie Medical product starting in October of last year. The rationale for doing that deal had two fundamental elements to it. One is it's a new source of revenue for us with customers that we are already calling on. These electrodes are used in the diagnostic process for patients that have uncontrolled epilepsy, drug-resistant epilepsy. Many patients, 60% of patients that have uncontrolled epilepsy have focal epilepsy, which is where seizures originate at a specific location within the brain. That's the current indication for the RNS device. For those patients, it often requires that they go through what's called intracranial monitoring, where temporary electrodes are positioned into the brain. The patient stays in the hospital, and the doctors use those temporarily implanted electrodes to determine where the seizures are coming from for that patient. Dixie Medical sells those electrodes that are used for that intracranial monitoring. Almost most of the patients that get an RNS device go through that process, go through that intracranial monitoring process prior to getting our device. Mm-hmm. Most patients that get other foot localization therapies like the resective procedures and ablative procedures also go through that same diagnostic process. For us, the Dixie Medical is selling those products to our current customers, the current centers, the current epilepsy surgeons and epileptologists. But it's also for us very important to be a call point upstream from our current therapy, because most patients are going through that diagnostic process first. That product gives us visibility into the patient pipeline, what patients are working through the diagnostic process within the centers, gives us an opportunity to educate the physicians on treatment options that include the RNS device, specifically the RNS device. It also gives us better visibility into the patients for patient education, patient awareness earlier in the diagnostic process. So a new source of revenue to our current customers, and a product line that we believe will help us accelerate adoption of RNS therapy as well.
Final question: where is NeuroPace headed? The clear path would be you continue to sell RNS, and that's kind of your primary business. Continue to try to convince doctors, but are there opportunities for you? And I know you're publicly traded, so you're not going to say too much, but how different might NeuroPace look in 3 to 5 years than it does today? Will it primarily still be a single therapy company, or do you see it being more than that?
Our primary focus today is on getting more patients that have drug-resistant focal epilepsy to be treated with the RNS device. We have a tremendous amount of opportunity there. I talked about 85% of the patients within the epilepsy centers not getting advanced therapy. That is our focus. The work we're doing in product development is to help enable that. The work we're doing in the commercial organization is to accelerate that adoption. That's job one. Beyond that, we are actively pursuing indication expansions within epilepsy. I mentioned that 60% of patients have focal epilepsy. The other 40% of patients have generalized epilepsy. Generalized epilepsy is similar, but the difference is that epilepsy seizures originate broadly across the brain all at one time. And we're taking our existing therapy, the RNS device and the algorithms, the way the product works, and applying it to brain networks to be able to treat patients that have generalized epilepsy. We received a breakthrough device designation for a generalized epilepsy indication expansion. We've started enrollment in our Nautilus study, which is a pivotal trial to expand into generalized epilepsy. We're also doing work with the NIH on a Lennox-Gastaut study, which is a specific type of symptomatic generalized epilepsy. Those efforts are well underway, and very excited about bringing our current technology to a broader market within epilepsy, helping more patients that have fewer treatment options, and over time, an opportunity to expand into other areas as well. We were very opportunistic in seeking out the partnership with Dixie Medical. looking where there may be other opportunities for things like that. But primarily, it's go after the market opportunity that we have today with our current indication, expand more broadly into epilepsy, and then planting the seeds for where we could go beyond that.
Are there other clinical areas that you could pursue?
There are other clinical areas that we can pursue. Right now, we're doing work with a number of institutions that have typically grant-funded research using responsive neurostimulation with the RNS device, with the NeuroPace RNS device, to treat a variety of other episodic brain conditions, episodic brain conditions. Those are in the early feasibility, early concept phase work. As we get proof points coming out of those of where responsive neurostimulation can have a differentiated benefit, opportunity for us to pursue those into additional clinical opportunities over the long run. The way that I think about it is we have the near term, which is adoption within our current indication. We have the medium term, which is expanding more broadly within epilepsy to treat all of these patients that have drug-resistant epilepsy. And then the long run is to take that fundamental approach that we have for responsive neurostimulation and applying that into other brain conditions that are undertreated with the therapies that are available today.
Great. Well, this is a very comprehensive look at NeuroPace. I'm sorry to take so much of your time, but it's just a fascinating topic. So, Mike Favet, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Great. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, Chris Newmarker, that is a wrap. Once again, how can folks find you out there in social media land?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker.
And I am on LinkedIn as well, Tom, Salemi. Please do share this podcast episode so folks can find this podcast, can know of this podcast on social media. And when you do, honestly, please do link with Chris and myself. Even if you don't share it, connect with Chris and myself. Let us be part of the conversations. We would like these podcasts to be the beginnings of some discussions on social media. So we'd love it if you would do your part.
Follow, subscribe.
I'm not there yet. Hold on. Good golly. I'm just telling them to share the podcast episode. All right. I've made that point. Chris Newmarker, we have our DeviceTalks podcast network. What do we want folks to do with that?
Follow, subscribe.
Good God. You are just so eager. Yes, follow, and or subscribe to the DeviceTalks podcast network. You will receive DeviceTalks Weekly, Intuitive Talks, Abbott Talks, Stryker Talks, Boston Scientific Talks, and we've got some nothing to announce yet, but working on some stuff. So, all right. And registration for, as I mentioned at the top, for DeviceTalks West is open. We'll have as our keynotes, as of the moment, we'll have Fred Khosravi of Imperative Care, major medtech innovator, successful entrepreneur, and Imperative Care is doing some very, very cool stuff, both in technology, but also in business. And very happy to announce that we have Dave Rosa, the president of Intuitive, who will open up day 2, which is actually the day of their earnings call. So he's taking time away from a busy morning to come join us on DeviceTalks West. So make sure you go to west.devicetalks.com or just go to devicetalks.com and find the conference. Register before it's mid-August, and you'll get in for like $395, which is a steal, Chris Newmarker.
It's awesome.
Yeah. It's probably like $1 for every person you're going to meet.
Exactly.
So your network's going to grow exponentially from this very small investment. So
yeah.
What's stopping you?
Nothing. I mean, that's like nothing. It's not. I mean, it's
for a conference, it is nothing.
For a conference.
For a conference these days, it's 2 days too.
Right.
So break that down.
If I went and bought a cup of coffee and it was $350, I'd be like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" But it's better be like. But
I just shelled out $43 to see a Spider-Verse movie. So did I build my brand doing that? No. Did I build my network doing that? No. I had a good time, but it was 2 hours and change. This is 2 days.
Was it real butter on the popcorn?
We didn't do butter this time. We shared a popcorn.
Nice.
The older one doesn't like it. The younger one does like it. So I went without.
It's good. It's good. Yeah, but exactly right. Yeah, for $350, you can meet $395, 99 cents.
Yeah.
No.
I just want to be honest in the advertising. $395, still a good deal.
You can Yeah, you can meet like, hundreds of medtech insiders and, yeah, even like shake hands with the president of Intuitive Surgical. So there you go.
Very nice man. So, all right, Chris Newmarker, I think we've sold him enough.
Got to be there or be square.
There it is. All right. That is a wrap. Thanks everybody for joining us on Device Talks Weekly podcast. We will be back next week. And then I think we're going to take the week off after that for the July 4th holiday. Yep. So, we'll definitely be back next week, and, we're rolling out new Boston Scientific talks, new, Abbott talks, new Intuitive talks. So they're all coming out. So make sure you subscribe, like, follow, and or subscribe, as Chris Newmarker says so well. So, all right, folks.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy the summer.